Have you ever just stopped and wondered what you actually are? I'm not talking about your job title or your personality quirks, but your literal fundamental structure. Today, we're diving into a truly mind-bending explainer on identity. I want you to imagine waking up one day and discovering that you aren't a person at all, but rather a pattern. Picture this. Our protagonist, a guy named Tad Enu, is just sitting there, eating his morning toast. You know, the kind with way too much butter on it. It's a completely ordinary morning, right up until he opens an envelope with no return address. And the letter inside? It casually drops the bomb that he is constructed entirely from the residue of 7 dead authors. This single piece of paper kicks off the ultimate philosophical investigation into art, identity, and what it actually means to exist.
To decode this mystery, we're going to follow Tad's own notes. We'll start with the anatomy of a pen name, move on to meeting the 7 authors, tackle the mystery of the unreadable 3 pages, and finally, look at the reader outside the window.
So, let's jump right into part 1, the anatomy of a pen name.
Tad gets this mysterious letter breaking the news that he's just the leftover residue of writers who stopped writing. But what does that actually mean? Well, the absolutely crucial point here is how we're redefining a pen name. Normally, we think of it as a disguise, right? Just a mask for a real biological person to hide behind. But in this universe, it's an emergent property. Tad Enu is the true name of a pattern that comes from the fusion of other authors. Like the letter tells him, this is taxonomy, it's not a metaphor.
Think about the difference between a mixture and a fusion. In a mixture, like salt and pepper, you can always separate the original parts back out. But Tad is a fusion. He is an inseparable new alloy where the original components are completely lost to create something entirely new and complex. He's not just some container walking around holding 7 ghosts. He's the unique chord that rings out when those 7 distinct notes are struck all at once. Which brings us perfectly to part 2, meeting the 7 authors. We really need to break down the component parts of Tad by looking at these distinct creative minds. They stopped writing, but their echoes now literally make up his entire existence. The source text divides these literary ghosts into 2 camps, the living dead, meaning they just stopped writing, and the double dead, meaning their physical bodies are gone too. And they map to some incredibly specific traits that haunt Tad's handwriting and his fragmented dreams. You've got the grief of living between languages, the uncanny ability to make failure funny, a strict philosophical refusal of simple answers, the power of extreme compression, an absolute obsession with the physical body, the rigid accuracy of journalism, and finally, a super mysterious 7th trait focused entirely on the reader. Trying to wrap his head around all this, Tad meets up with someone named Ho Dee. He finds this mysterious contact in an old 1987 phone book, and they meet at a cafe with a wobbly, short-legged chair. And guess what? It turns out Ho Dee is the pattern's own self-awareness. He's the internal critic that noticed the pattern in the first place and actually sent Tad that initial letter to kickstart the investigation. Think about it. Say his name a certain way, Ho Dee. You get it, right? He's literally the whole of Tad, looking back at himself from across a cafe table.
Ho Dee is pretty brutal about framing Tad's existence. He completely separates the messy, biographical human from the pure art. The person, he says, has neuroses, embarrassments, and totally ordinary desires. They are the clunky, physical instrument. But the writer, the pen name, Tad, is just the music. There's no instrument at all, just the pure, surviving music of the art itself.
All right, let's turn to part 3, the unreadable 3 pages.
To prove that he actually exists independently, Tad has to write a book called The Interior. But here's the catch. It has to be a book that only he, this highly specific fusion of 7 authors, could possibly write. At the absolute center of this novel within a novel are 3 crucial pages, and the most important fact about them, they physically exist. He literally wrote them down in his notebook.
But here is the wild part. You cannot read them. This perfectly illustrates this mind-bending concept of constitutive unreadability. The fact that you cannot access this text isn't some editing mistake or a missing chapter. It is the text's exact purpose. You are explicitly, intentionally prevented from seeing what's on those pages.
That is literally the point. This blank space represents the profound, aching absence you feel when you're standing on the outside of those invisible pages. Tad comes to realize that the experience of being excluded from the text isn't a failure. It's actually a really powerful form of knowledge. And it's a type of knowledge you can only ever get through that feeling of exclusion. This whole idea is beautifully brought to life by a 13-year-old reader in the story named Fiona. She reads Tad's novel and totally nails it. She says,
The memory almost coming feels like proof that the memory exists. It's brilliant. That intense frustration of almost reading the pages, that deep feeling of missing out on them, that is the exact proof of their reality and their immense emotional weight.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 4, the reader outside the window.
This is where we hit the final epiphany and uncover the identity of that mysterious first author. She's listed 7th on Tad's list, but chronologically, she was actually the very first. Her name is Ada. We learn that Ada is the oldest layer, the absolute deepest grammar of Tad's existence. And she believed something incredibly radical. She believed that the reader is the author's true collaborator. She wrote specifically for the reader who would come long after her, making anyone who truly engages with a book the actual co-author.
Her philosophy is perfectly captured in this quote. You are writing for the reader who is outside the window looking at the light inside. Let's just unpack that. It explains how feeling excluded from the text, standing out in the dark, looking at the warm glow of those 3 unreadable pages, is a complete, meticulously designed experience. The glass of the window isn't there to keep you out. The glass is the art form itself.
The mechanics of Ada's philosophy break down like this. Step 1. The writer creates the space, basically turning on the light in the room. Step 2. The text remains fundamentally incomplete, just like lights spilling out of a window into the night. And step 3, it's the reader's encounter that actually makes it whole. It shows us that the very act of reading, even reading in absence, is an act of pure co-creation.
So Ada leaves this massive, ultimate question for Tad, completely shifting the focus of his entire existence. She asks, when you write the 3 pages, who will you be writing them for? It takes all that heavy burden off the creator who is endlessly trying to prove they exist, and it places it right onto you, the audience. Your presence is what ultimately makes the art real.
And suddenly, Tad gets it. He realizes his ultimate purpose. It's the passing forward of the packed bag. I just love this phrase because it brilliantly captures the only true immortality literature actually has. It isn't about slapping your biographical name on a spine forever. It's about packing a bag with absolutely everything you know, leaving an unfinished sentence for the next person, like young Fiona, to pick up, and just trusting that a future traveler is going to need it.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I've got to ask you to think about your own role in all of this. In the stories you consume, sure, you were the co-author standing outside the window. But in the actual life you are building right now, whose packed bag are you carrying forward? And who are you leaving your unfinished sentences for?